Hello and welcome, I'm Fahd Husain. Every year, governments in Pakistan announce budgets worth trillions of rupees. Every year we hear promises of better schools, better hospitals, better roads and better public services. And yet for millions of Pakistanis, the daily experience remains largely unchanged. Government schools struggle, public hospitals face shortages, local roads remain neglected, and basic municipal services often fail to meet the expectations. So the obvious question is, where is all this money going? The World Bank has tried to answer that question in a major new report titled Strengthening Fiscal Federalism in Pakistan. It examines how public money is collected, how it is divided between Islamabad and the provinces, and ultimately how it reaches or sometimes fails to reach the ordinary citizen. The report makes an important point. It says Pakistan's challenge is not simply a lack of money. The deeper problem lies in how our financial system is structured, how responsibilities are divided, and how public funds are managed after they are allocated. So what does this report say? First, I'm going to show you the important elements in that report, and then we're going to have a proper in-depth discussion on what to do about it. So, quickly, how Pakistan's money flows. These are the important things which are spelled out very clearly in the report. Of course, three governments, one taxpayer. The taxpayer pays the money to the federal government, which collects most of the taxes. Then that money is divided through the National Finance Commission, which is the NFC, and given to Punjab, Sindh, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. They're supposed to give that a share to the local governments, which they're not doing, or not doing as they should be doing, but that's a separate topic. And then ultimately that money should be used for services to the government. The key question is this system delivering better services to the citizens? And I think the answer is pretty obvious, sadly. Pakistan has three levels of government, and here's where one of the key problems has been identified. Again, this is not breaking news, we all know it. Federal government, provincial government and local government, but this local government is almost missing, and no political party is ready or willing to actually follow the constitution and have empowered local governments. Massive failure of our system. Next, let's see what we have. Now, problem number one. The federal government still pays for defense, debt servicing, foreign affairs, national highways, climate obligations, national infrastructure and social protection. 57.5% of the divisible tax pool goes to the provinces. All the money that the federal government collects, 57.5% it gives to the provinces. The World Bank says, right at the bottom in the red, the World Bank says financing no longer matches responsibilities, contributing to a structural federal fiscal deficit. That's pretty obvious. We should have resolved this issue, but one of the major failures of our political system and political parties is the inability to solve this basic problem. Let's go to the next one now. The big question, after the 18th Amendment, did citizens get better services? We do know is that after the 18th Amendment, the provinces got a lot of money. But has that money translated into actual better service delivery for the citizens? The answer, of course, is known to all. And it is a depressing answer. What changed after 2010? Provinces received much larger share of the federal taxes. Provinces became responsible for health, education, and many public services. Provincial budgets increased significantly, and I think we need to re-emphasize significantly. That's a lot of money that the provinces are getting. But more money equals better services. What citizens expected, ideally speaking? Better hospitals, better schools, better water supply, better roads, better local services. Have we gotten them? The World Bank finding very clearly says provincial spending increased substantially after devolution, but improvements in public service delivery have been uneven across Pakistan. Again, a depressing reality that we all know, but somehow we are unable to do anything about it. Next one, There's more to come. So where did the money go? That's the obvious question, which we are asking every single day, but clearly not as loudly as we should be. The largest growth since 2010 has been in salaries, government salaries, provincial mostly, pensions and administration. This is where our money is going. 80% is recurring expenditure, all of this. And where is the smallest increase? Obviously, again, as I said, this is no breaking news, but this is as depressing as it can get. Where did the smaller increases register? Education, health, service delivery. Only 20% is development expenditure. And pensions, please note this figure, from 2009 till 2023, pensions registered 330% increase. Finds much of the increase in provincial spending has been absorbed by recurrent expenditure rather than frontline public services, and that is why we see the state of development, as poor as it is. So, one of the reasons, the missing government. Local government is supposed to provide, this is the closest to citizens. Roads, clinics, schools, water, parks, garbage collection, streets. Local government share in 2005 was 10%. And in 2024, it has come down to 4.7%. This is the biggest failure of provinces which are ruled by our main political parties. And even today, no political party is ready and willing to actually empower the local government. So the report says the World Bank argues Pakistan's devolution effectively stopped at the provincial level, leaving local governments underpowered, and that remains so till today. And finally, if we look at the key thing, the World Bank's 5 reforms, what are they advocating? Right-size the federal government, reduce overlap after the 18th Amendment. That hasn't happened. Federal government is refusing to actually cut down its own expenditure. Fix the GST system. Reduce fragmentation across just 5 taxes, 5 tax jurisdictions. The general sales tax is a complete mess right now. Strengthen provinces' own taxes, especially agriculture, income and property taxes. The provinces need to start earning their own revenue. They're refusing to do so. Massive failure. Empower local governments. As obvious as it gets. Regular provincial finance commission awards, predictable funding, and stronger local authority. And finally, modernize the NFC formula of the National Finance Commission. Allocate resources based on need, fiscal capacity, and service delivery, not primarily population. Again, something that we have been talking about for a long time. Here's the bitter truth. The report is telling us everything that we know, and yet we are failing to undertake these reforms. Why? Let's discuss. All right, now let's go deeper into the contents of the report. I've explained to you what it contains, what are the main features, the main bullet points, and the message that is coming across pretty loud and clear. So we'll keep referring to that, but today I've got 3 people with me here who, with their help, we'll try and figure out how important these findings are, although none of them are breaking news. We know all of these things, but the fact that we're being reminded by the World Bank that this is what we need to do, how important is that, and will that make a difference? So I'm joined today by Dr. Nadeemul Haque, former Vice Chancellor of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, PIDE, also Pakistan, one of the most well-known economists of Pakistan. Mr. Taimur Salim Jhagra, again, needs no introduction, former finance minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and one of the people who've actually genuinely tried to reform the system. And I use the word reform because some things happened and some didn't, but that's for another time. And of course, last but certainly not least, Mr. Shahbaz Rana, Pakistan's foremost business and economy journalist, who is also looking at this report very deeply. Thank you all for joining us today. Taimur Sahab, if I start, let me start with you. Now, this report is and I want to start with one of the findings, which essentially says that the federal government through the NFC gives money to the provinces and has devolved so many important subjects down to the provinces, and yet it retains many of those devolved subjects and continues to spend money, which is essentially wasting money. Why have we not been able to change this?
I think, Fahd, the answer is very simple. The answer is that in general, institutionally, there has never been the political appetite for change. If you actually want to enact that change, you will see it through the sort of actions that signal decisiveness, that are simple but politically difficult. And let me tell you this, it's not just civilian governments, neither civilian nor military governments have been able to do this, right? And you wonder, what's the constant in that? Is the constant the bureaucracy? Is the constant that we're simply unable to change our rules? Let me tell you what I mean, right? It's not just that these departments haven't been closed, right? Because in any other country, there would be a huge hue and cry around why taxpayers are still financing departments. So forget departments. Take an institution like Pakistan Steel, where salaries are paid and there hasn't been a single gram of steel produced in around 20 years. Which sort of country would actually countenance this if it actually wanted to reform its political system? So that's one. The other thing is, it's not just the shutting down of those departments. Looking at the structure, the size, and the payouts within every department in government. And that is true both in the federal government as well as provinces, except the challenge, the limits to, as you said, when I was reforming and we managed big ticket reform like pensions, the constraint actually was that there are hugely embedded conventions, such as the increase of pay, such as the structure of a department, such as how recruitment happens, such as the pension system, in which not by law but by convention, the federal government and provincial governments are tied up. And what I found was that in particular in the bureaucracy, there was zero appetite for change. And I can tell you my last comment, that continues to be the case today. The federal government and the federal bureaucracy wants kudos for small measures such as, eliminating empty posts or, if you like, taking difficult decisions on increasing the tax burden on you and on me. But no one wants to answer why none of these senior bureaucrats want to finance their own pensions.
So it's
right?
actually,
because charity and responsibility begins at home.
It's actually, Danak, I know that you have been talking about all of these things for a number of years. And the fact is that, even though you may disagree with why, the World Bank is producing this such a report, but what they are saying is what we all agree on. So what is your problem or what is your criticism on the report then?
It's very simple. First of all, there is nothing new in this report. It's all hearsay. There's no real economic modeling here. There's no real economic news here. It's all hearsay. One. Two, it is totally uninformative as far as the reform process goes. As Taimur has just pointed out, that for God's sake, the reform process is much deeper, and the World Bank never talks of reform. The World Bank only does superficial analysis and presents it to us at a huge cost. This report, I've estimated, will cost about $1 million. And FCDO funded this report. Why is FCDO interested in funding this report? FCDO is a British Foreign Office. Why is the British Foreign Office funding this report? Third, This is a hugely contentious political topic in this country. It has very little economics in it. It's a hugely contentious political topic. And I know lots of economists like to write about it, and our journalists like to write about it. Yes, journalists should write about it. That's their job. But for economists to get into a deep political issue, I don't think it's a great idea. Taimur will tell you, KPK has its own problems. Karachi has its own, Sindh has its own problems. For God's sakes, this is a political issue. Let's keep it a political issue, right? This thing of taking from, robbing Paul to pay Paul, to pay Harry, whatever, Peter, this is a stupid idea. It's not reform. And fourthly, the most important thing is, hey, local reform. Local bodies, local government, whatever you might call it.
I want to come to that.
There is no discussion of local reform. But hang on, the report.
They do mention local government, by the way.
The report doesn't talk about it. They mention it, yes. Fahd, you forget, I used to write these reports for 30, 40 years. We mention things when we want to be able to say that we mentioned it, but there's no analysis. Fourth thing, the deep reform that Taimur is talking about, the civil service reform, the Perks pension reform, the plot reform, all those things are ducked by the World Bank, not today, but for 75 years. And this is the report only to unlock a loan. So I think, quite frankly, we as Pakistanis must push back. That, hey, there are some things you can't get into, and we as economists also need to push back.
But then,
it's a political issue.
Shahbaz Saab, but then my point would be that if we have to push back, and I agree with Dr. Saab, we should push back. But what is more important, pushing back against organizations like the World Bank to remind us of what we need to do, or pushing against the status quo and inertia in reform that Taimur Saab is talking about? I mean, why can we not finish off those departments that have been devolved? It's not a very complicated issue. Everybody agrees on it, but somehow nobody gets it done. And that is the real challenge. So if this report is reminding us, for God's sake, get that reform done, shouldn't we listen to it?
Let me clarify 2 to 3 points. Number one, we should not be bothered who is saying this. We should be bothered what has been said. And why the World Bank is important in this case, because Dr. Nadeemul Haque does not give $2 billion per annum loan to Pakistan. It is the World Bank that finances Pakistan's external financing needs. So if the World Bank is saying this, and it has some weight, and the government listens to it, then what is the problem here? And frankly, World Bank has been advising on so many issues. Dr. Nadeemul Haque himself has shared platform with the World Bank. His organization that he used to represent once, Fahd, has shared platform with the World Bank and launched many reports from that platform. So to me, this is not important. To me, what is important? What has been said in this report? As you have said, that the report has summarized what has been said in Pakistan soon after the 18th constitutional amendment and soon after the 7th NFC award, that the federal government is spending in areas which is no more of its responsibility. Now the World Bank has, although I agree with Dr. Nadeem that Dr. Nadeem has said that, Fahd has said that, many other economists, including Dr. Ishfaq Hassan Khan, has said that. But the point is, when the World Bank says that, look, the federal government, you have been spending excessively, and when you have been spending excessively, it is leading to a point where your fiscal deficit is increasing. And when your fiscal deficit is increasing, the country's debt is increasing, you have to stop. So when the World Bank says that you have to stop, and the government doesn't stop, because it cannot stop, so it means there is a problem. And second thing, frankly, there is a data in this report, and that data has been, it is publicly available, but it is now available in one report where we can see since 2010 to 2024, the federal government increased employment in non-devolved subjects by 85%. Did we know before that? Personally, I didn't know that. And secondly, the provincial governments. The provincial governments, they increased their spending on salaries and pensions in multiple times. We used to say that, but there was not one refined report that.
Actually, I want to.
So let's focus on the point, and the.
Sorry, finish your thought.
The point is that what has been said in the report and what has been recommended.
Okay, so you know what Shahbaz Rana was saying, Taimur Saab, the fact is that the provinces, this report very clearly says that the provinces are getting a lot of money, and some of the money is being used fairly well, and it pinpoints to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and I was saying this should come as music to your ears, that the only province which has actually shown some improvement in poverty reduction, etc., as a result of more revenue coming in is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is good. That's a good thing. But still, overall, the report says that the kind of money that provinces are getting, that is not translating into better service delivery. It's going into salaries and increase in emoluments and pensions and all those other things. And that is a fact. So my point is, the province, and you should know this better than anybody, the provinces are not sharing the responsibility of governance in terms of the kind of money that they're getting. They have to acknowledge their own failure.
And I think this is where, in a way, the weight of the report crumbles, not because necessarily there is zero truth to what you're saying or what this report says, but because, as Dr. Nadeem says, it's not skimming below the surface at all, right? Because I think at some point it is important that we actually highlight and deal with these issues, and I firmly believe that can only be done or is likelier to be done when we actually start to identify these issues ourselves, right? And this is where I think there is definitely a point, right, of whether an international institution is getting into areas where it is, getting into political issues that are perhaps best dealt with in another way. But let me tell you what I mean, right? Number one, can the provinces do better with the money that they have? Yes, they can, right? The problem with a framing like this is, and I know that this is where the federal authorities use a singular learning like this, right, to ask for something big and to obtain something big, as they did with the around 12 or 1300 billion rupees that they've clawed back from the provinces this year, right? But where can the provinces actually do better? They can do better in terms of, let's say, a more dynamic, more modern pay system. Where is that controlled from? That's controlled from the DMG bureaucracy. Where does that reside? That resides in Islamabad. They can do with shifting all employees to a contributory pension system, right? Where is that controlled from? I know, because when I shifted new employees, because I know I had the legal right to this, the entire set of unions in the provinces made me the biggest villain in the entire country, saying that the other provinces and the federal government weren't doing this. We went ahead with our reform, but I had to singularly bear the weight of that, right? Because everyone believes that by convention, reform like this should only happen when all four provinces and the federal government agree, right? What disappointed me a lot was not, for example, that the provinces are giving money for strategic needs such as defense. What disappointed me that what that reflects was two things. One, that effectively what the federal government is doing is admitting to defeat, that it can't cut costs or that it can't raise revenue in such a way, right, that it can start to make ends meet. And the second thing is that, if there were a genuine will for reform, and I agree that that's where the federal government needs to show leadership, why haven't the federal finance minister, the prime minister, along with four provinces, effectively been working day and night at this? Because effectively to try and, claw back 1,000 billion rupees from the provinces in this manner
I agree
is actually just...
No, it's not an either-or question anymore. It's not an either-or question anymore. I agree with you. I mean, yes, the federal government has to do much more. Yes, the federal government, it created this huge committee to cut down government expenditures and right-sizing of the government. I don't know what's come out of it. So absolutely, yes. It is the federal government which is not doing what it needs to do. It is also the provincial government. And you asked, what more can the provincial governments do? The report mentions two obvious things. One is putting tax on agriculture, two, putting tax on property, and generate your own revenue, be less dependent on the center. Provinces need to do all this. They're not doing it.
Sorry. Great example, and I'd like to cover a couple of points on it. My point, let me just finish the last one in one sentence, was what I would have liked to have seen if there was serious national intent for reform is for the federal finance minister, the provincial ministers to sit and over the last year sort out the NFC. If you look at the actual amount of time given to the NFC over the last year, if you want to restructure the formula, it is next to zero. So I'm sorry, there is zero intent for reform. Now let's get to areas like agriculture income tax. In 2022, I offered to the FBR to become the collection agent for agriculture income tax. It refused. It refused. I've even given them suggestions on that in writing through the Board of Revenue in KP. And the reason I did that was, it obviously makes sense for income tax to be collected through one window.
You can pinpoint towards both sides. But Shahbaz, you've been covering all this, and obviously my own assessment or my opinion on this report is that whatever it lists out, it may not be something groundbreaking. Most of these things are well known, pointed out, discussed to death. The issue is that despite knowing that these are the problems that we need to resolve, we are still not resolving it. That is the issue. So with this report coming out and detailing all of this, do you think this could add some pressure on both the provinces and the center to get their act together?
So I do not have very high hopes that the federal and the provincial governments would listen to the findings of this or the main recommendation of this report. The reason being, the recommendations are tilted in favor of the federal government, and when the stakes of both the stakeholders are not taken care for, then there are least chances that the recommendation will be implemented. Like the main finding is that if the federal government's revenues are still less than its requirements, it may deduct money from the provincial shares. So the question is, at one hand, the World Bank says that the federal government was fiscally irresponsible. It spent in areas during the past 15 years which was not its responsibility under the constitution. And on the other hand, the World Bank says, okay, the federal government should prioritize its exercise of right sizing of the government, which means to close down the departments which are no more relevant. But still, if it needs money, it can take that money from the provincial governments. So that is a kind of point that the provinces may not agree. And the report seems protecting the interest of the federal government at the expense of the provincial governments. And there is no doubt that the provincial governments also wasted money in buying luxury cars for its bureaucrats, in giving extra salaries, executive allowances, and then increasing pensions and all that. But that does not mean that the federal government should start deducting the expenses, deducting the grants of the provinces. And the second thing which is important, and at one hand the World Bank says that the federal government spent in areas which is the provincial domain, like the social safety net. And social safety net here means the benefit income support program. But on the other hand, the recommendation says that the federal government should continue with the BISP, and the provinces should chip in money for the BISP, which will be under and is under the administrative control of the federal government. And now the provinces have been saying since long that why would we give the money for a project, for a program in which we do not have any say in its decision making.
Right.
And same is true for the other areas where the federal government says like we need money, extra money from the provinces, and the provinces say, look, if you want money from us, let us have a say in decision making. Either it is foreign policy, either it is a matter of national security, or the management of the public debt. So until and unless the provinces are given a say, a solid constitutional say in these policy matters, why would the provinces agree to this recommendation? And secondly, there is an exception that has been created this year when the federal government and at least two provincial governments, Punjab and Sindh, they agreed for a reverse grant, meaning that whatever share the provinces, these two provinces would get out of the NFC, they will pay back, according to the federal government, they will pay back 1.03 trillion. According to the provincial budget, the amount is 800 billion. So that's an exception, but it cannot become a norm every year.
But then the problem, finally, Taimur Saab, I want to close this discussion and kind of zoom out now. I mean, we've looked at the report and we've talked about all these things that we always talk about. And ultimately, you know, the most depressing thing for me personally is that every time that we talk about what is wrong with our system of governance and what to do with it, we end up reaching the same kind of conclusions that the bureaucracy doesn't want this to happen or the political leadership doesn't want it to happen. Ultimately, you know, and it makes me feel that as a country of 250 million people who is now actually negotiating peace for the world, we can't change our bureaucracy. I mean, is that how helpless this system is? Or are we just, you know, piling up all our failures on the bureaucracy because we don't want to go to other places? I mean, it boggles my mind, Taimur Saab, that bureaucracy is so huge and so big that everybody says, you know, we can't do anything. Is that how actually helpless this system is?
In a way, yes, Fahd. And I think there are multiple reasons. And those multiple reasons both include the fact that we have so much turbulence in our system and so many resets that after every reset, both those who are ruling directly and indirectly have to learn afresh rather than actually build on reform that's done. We've also designed a system that is very good at stopping change. And in a way that is good. And if you remember, there's a book called Pakistan, a Hard Country by Anatole Levin, who actually wrote that in a way, this design of our governance system stops Pakistan from failing, but it also stops Pakistan from progressing, because it means that every time there is any innovation in the system, the entire system, from the bureaucracy to the judicial system to the political leadership, or at least one of the major stakeholders, are actually pushing back. And this has actually created the sort of culture where every entity, every institution, every individual ends up thinking, let me look after my interests first. Compare this with a very similar system, Fahd. Think of India before 1991, when they decided to liberalize the economy, say goodbye to the IMF, and decide to follow their own path of reform. The difference is that once they did it, they stopped generating reports and they start just working government to government, party to party, regardless of who's in power, on liberalizing their economic system, cutting red tape, creating the conditions for business to thrive and for investment to come. And you see the difference. Look at the mid-90s. Pakistan beats India on every indicator, from investment to GDP per capita to GDP growth to poverty. And look at the difference today. We are left competing with sub-Saharan Africa. And forget India, even countries like Bangladesh, and on some indicators, even countries like Afghanistan, say, take our maternal mortality numbers, do better than Pakistan. Who is to blame for that?
Is it the bureaucracy?
The entire system is.
Is it the bureaucracy?
It is indeed sad. Well, it's not just the bureaucracy. It's every stakeholder in government. But what is sad, if you look at the last 4 years, is I don't think there's been a bigger burning platform for change economically. But if you look beyond the cosmetic changes, what fundamental change has come in Pakistan's economic system and the governance behind it? Zero.
Fair enough. So obviously, you know, there are so many different angles to it that we need to discuss. But I'm grateful, Taimur Jagra Saab, Shahbaz Rana, and Dr. Nadeem ul Haq for joining us today and talking about this. Thank you. We'll take a short break here, but this is a topic that we need to keep coming back to because, you know, when I read this report, it really, what it tells me is that we all know what needs to be done. It's a question of doing it. And when it comes to why that work, that reform is not done, then we start producing explanations for, you know, this person doesn't allow us to do that, or that institution is the problem. And that creates this kind of helplessness where you know that you need to fix this country, you know how this country should be fixed, and yet you can't do it. So that's something that we need to keep talking about regularly and perhaps a bit more aggressively. Let's take a break. When we come back, much more to come. All right, now let's turn to the story which has been unfolding in Doha, Qatar for the last couple of days. It is now officially confirmed that the round of talks has now finished. It wasn't really face-to-face kind of talks between the Americans and the Iranians. It was an indirect way of engaging with each other through mediators, Pakistan and Qatar. Now, what has come out of those talks, one is not clear. And perhaps the expectations are a little low given the deep mistrust that continues to define this relationship between Iran and the United States. It is being said now that whenever the two sides meet again is going to be after the funeral of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, which is scheduled for this week. So we are looking at least a couple of days, if not more, before the two sides can start engaging with each other. So now is a good time to take stock and figure out whether there is cause for hope, or are we looking at a long, protracted process through which there may be a deal, there may not be a deal. Hard to say. So that's what I'm going to talk about today with my guest who's joining us today, Mr. Erwin Van Veen. He's a senior research fellow at Klingendale's Conflict Research Unit and specializes in the Middle East. Mr. Van Veen, welcome to our show once again.
Thank you so much.
So now what are you hearing from Doha? Anything that should give us some hope that things are actually moving forward?
Well, I mean, what we can do with regards to Doha without anticipating the exact discussions, I think, is take stock of the strategic environment and to assess to what extent this is positive towards a more durable arrangement between Iran and the United States. And I think there is some cause for hope here for two reasons, I think. One is that Iran has no really foolproof strategy to keep itself safe from future attack. So it can basically, try to develop a nuclear weapon which is subject to detection and then punishment. It can restore its missile capability, but this is not effective against Israeli and US military forces. Or it could close the Strait of Hormuz, but this would turn the world against it if it did it without justification. On the other hand, the US does not have a good way to defeat Iran either. It tried negotiations, it tried sanctions, it tried economic warfare, and it tried real warfare, and none of it brought about the desired result. So this has basically brought the parties back to the table, but this time with the additional understanding that there are no good escalation options anymore.
Now that's a realization that could actually inject a dose of realism within Washington's policy. But if you look at their rhetoric, and we can understand to an extent that a politician will speak in a certain way to engage with his vote bank. So one can understand when Mr. Donald Trump begins to write very aggressive posts. But what I would like you to analyze for us is how realistic is America's understanding of Iran now? And I say that because I know before the war, the Americans thought this would be a walkover. This would be like Venezuela. And that was perhaps a misreading of the situation, which the Americans have been doing. They have a long track record of misreading Iran. Or it could be Israelis, painting a really rosy picture for them. In either case, the assessment was wrong. Do you think now they realize how wrong they were? And in this process today, do you think their approach is much more realistic and much more grounded now?
Well, I would say yes and no to that excellent question. I mean, if you look at the broad sweep of American policy and actions towards Iran, it is definitely true that that has been colored by two main ideas. One is that the Islamic Republic is run by a bunch of mad mullahs, right? So there is no rationality in foreign policy, there is just ideology. Well, this idea is patently false, but it still lingers. And there has also been a lack of recognition, I think, that Iran is a country like any other with legitimate national security interests. That it may be that it may consider to be at stake at different points in its history, including the US invasion of Iraq, for example, and that of Afghanistan, which are both neighbors of Iran. So there is that problem of perception and framing. Having said that, we know that the American intelligence services and the diplomatic service of the US are really good. So they know their briefs on Iran. This is not the problem. I think the problem is more at the current top-level political echelon, like the people around President Trump, to be more specific. They sometimes seem to be acting on a whim, bad information, Israeli influence, and their own personal opinions about what the world should look like. And I think that particular aspect of the equation, as you say, just met a very hard reality check, right? Iran is not going to be bending over in the way that some key US politicians wanted. And this is why we're back at the table now. So the answer is, I think, a mix of both. But given the current importance of personalities and their preferences in the US system, I wouldn't put any money on a deeper understanding of Iran really having sunk in at the right places, to be totally honest.
Mr. Van Veen, if the case, then that's actually kind of scary, because even though the war is over, one hopes, and it's not going to start again, but the negotiations are crucial for the United States and for Iran. And those negotiations are unlikely to end in some sort of a deal within 60 days if we just look at the past and see how long they've gone on. Now, on one side, you've got people like Mr. Ghalibaf or Mr. Arakchi. They are people who've been in the Iranian system for years, and they are hardened negotiators in the JCPOA. Mr. Arakchi, if I'm not wrong, was one of the main negotiators. So he's been in the system and he knows everything there is to know about negotiating with the US. On the other side, you don't see professional diplomats from the State Department. You don't see experienced people from within their bureaucracy, from the system. You see two people who are very close to President Trump. I'm of course referring to Mr. Witkoff and Jared Kushner. So now, this picture that I painted, one side versus the other side, either in Lucerne or in Islamabad or in Doha or anywhere else, that could create its own kind of problems.
Well, as a matter of fact, I would offer for your consideration that it already did, right? Because we know the reports of the last round of negotiations that were still going on with Omani facilitation when the US started its bombing campaign with Israel on the 28th of February, where we've all read the reports that I think Mr. Witkoff came back to Washington with a report on the concessions the Iranians were ready to make that did not reflect the understanding of neither the Omani foreign minister nor the British security advisor, who were actually at the time quite impressed by the extent that Tehran was willing to go in order to prevent a shift to military action and to get to some sort of agreement. So it is definitely a problem, this difference in diplomatic and negotiation experience. And it's a simple result, I think, of the fact that President Trump has surrounded himself with people who are either known to him through business relations or family ties, and that these are the people who have his ear, basically. So this makes it very dependent on the personal opinions of just a couple of people who do not necessarily have the experience you need to deal with Iran, right? Which is a complex and complicating country in this particular file.
Mr. Van Veen, here in Pakistan, we are trying our best. I think everybody knows we've tried whatever we could do. We're still at it. Our leadership is still fully engaged, not just with the two, Washington and Tehran, but with all the Gulf countries and all the stakeholders. And we've seen some successes, but you're right. There is still so much that could go wrong. So we are keeping our fingers crossed and hoping for the best here in Islamabad. Thank you so much for joining us. Always such a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for your analysis.
It is my privilege. The world owes you a debt of thanks together with Oman and Qatar for your efforts to bring this conclusion to a more durable peace, I think. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. All right, we'll take a short break here. When we come back, some very interesting stories coming up. Do stay with us. All right, now let's turn to a very important story coming out of the Supreme Court. A judgment has been issued and it pertains directly to women's right in Pakistan, which is what makes it so very important. What does the judgment say? Let's take a quick look. Now, according to this landmark Supreme Court judgment on women's inheritance rights strengthened, the case was Noor Muhammad versus Ghulam Haider, Supreme Court of Pakistan, 30th June 2026. And what it does is a number of things. Let's quickly go forward and we will find out some details of this judgment. The case, of course, here's the important thing. 1955, it's from that time, 50 years. 1955, the father died, all the legal heirs inherited the estate. Second mutation claimed that daughters gifted shares. Familiar story. The brothers became sole owners. Later, exchange and gift transactions happened, and decades later, family challenges the mutation, and the case reaches the Supreme Court. Essentially, as happens, the brothers decided that they're going to take all the property, and that's how it happened without the consent of the sisters. The journey through the courts. Now, this is actually an indictment of our judicial system also. The trial court upheld the brothers' right, the appeal upheld their right, the Lahore High Court upheld their right. Till about here, the sisters remained deprived of their right. Ultimately, the Supreme Court overturned all of these courts' judgments and a decision was taken and ordered. Now, why the Supreme Court disagreed with the earlier judgments? They said that the gift was never proven. There was no declaration by the owner. There was no acceptance by the donee, and the delivery of possession is very important. That was not done. None of these were proven. The court also required proof that women understood their rights, knew the consequences, and voluntarily gave them up. All of these things were not proven, and finally justice has prevailed after 50 years. Now, based on all of this, the key legal principles that have been established, mutation does not equal ownership, revenue record is not title of property, burden of proof, the beneficiaries must prove that they were actually gifted. Co-heirs, one heir's possession is possession for all co-heirs unless there is clear repudiation, and limitation delay alone cannot validate an invalid gift. So these are some of the principles that have been established. Now the final verdict says that mutation was declared illegal, subsequent transactions were declared void, women's inheritance restored, revenue record corrected, shares redistributed according to law. And why this matters is because women's inheritance is a constitutional, Islamic and legal right. The courts must closely scrutinize every transaction that excludes female heirs. Now, this is an important judgment which deals with a very big social ill, unfortunately, that exists in Pakistan. What does this mean, and would this change things in any significant way? Let's discuss. All right, now let's go into some depth of this case and try and understand the real significance of what the Supreme Court has actually ordered. And to interpret this case, this order, I'm joined by two very distinguished legal experts. Barrister Asad Rahim is my first guest. He is a very well-known lawyer and also a commentator, and he did his, he read law at the London School of Economics and was called to the bar at the Lincoln's Inn and is now a partner in his own firm. My second guest is Siba Farooq. She is the founder of SNS Law Associates, which is Pakistan's first all-women law firm. And she is also the chair of the Islamabad High Court Committee on Women Empowerment. Thank you both for joining us today. In fact, Siba, if I were to start with you, what in your opinion is the real significance of this Supreme Court order?
Walaikum assalam, and thank you for having me on this show, and especially to discuss such an important issue. It's an issue that is very relevant for our law firm because we're an all-women law firm, and we receive numerous cases of women who have been deprived of their inheritance and do not know what to do about that. So the importance, I think this judgment, this 13-page judgment has come really again to remind us that women, the right of inheritance of women is a constitutional right. It is their Islamic right. It is protected by statutes, and it is something that they are, it is their vested right.
Barrister Asad, your first reaction to this judgment, and what does it mean for the women of Pakistan?
Ji, thank you for having me, Fahd Saab. As far as this decision is concerned, I would want to maybe step away from the framing of such decisions. We've seen that in the last few years, when judgment of this nature is handed down, in the press and lawyers, legal analysts then say that this is a great victory for women's rights, for property rights, and for the general status of women. The fact is that this decision has not really broken new ground at all. There was a judgment of this nature by Justice Qazi Faiz Isa in the earlier part of this decade. If you want to go further back, there was a landmark judgment, Ghulam Ali's case, which was in 1989, in which Justice Afzal Zalla Sahab went much further and said that all of these property rights have to be linked to a women's safety and security, and how unfortunate is it when they are deprived. The point is, Fahd Saab, that this is not an issue that involves the improvement of the rights of the woman. This is as much of a legal issue as it is a social sickness that is premised on the role of the man in households. This is a societal sickness, I would go as far as saying. You and everyone here, everyone knows people close to us, not close to us, where within the home, if a woman asks for her financial status, leave alone financial right, entire houses are broken up, women are completely, ties are severed with them, and the men, whether that's the uncles, whether that's fathers, whether that's brothers. In this case, it was two brothers from 1955. They are anticipating that moment where they can swoop in and essentially take over your property and take over your right. So before we even get into the aspect of legal implementation or of legislation or of what these judgments have been saying, frankly speaking, for the past 3 decades, we have to look at societally, when will the man reinforce the fact that the woman has to be given her right, her sister, his daughter, his niece, especially in the event of uncles and brothers waiting to disinherit you. So I would say, sir, this is not a new precedent. This has reaffirmed an old position, and the problem lies in society.
That's all for today. We'll see you tomorrow.